Hi everybody. Pleased to introduce Tim Emerson of Emerson & Company, our guest today. And Tim is the founder of Emerson & Company, which is a merchant services company that provides credit card services and behind the scene work for merchants across the country. Tim's also very, very involved in local community. I'll just read through a few of his accolades here. Treasurer and board member, Parkville Chamber of Commerce, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Treasurer, charter member of Waldo Brookside Rotary Club, Kansas City Breakfast Club, Assistant Governor, District 6040 of Rotary Club, and Deacon at the Country Club Christian Church. I don't know how you sleep.
Well, I've got a 1-year-old. I don't need to sleep.
They don't let you sleep either. Very good. Tim, trying to get rolling here. Give me at a high level. What do you do? What is the basics of the credit card processing for anybody that may not know?
So the basics for any merchant account is that I want the merchants thinking about what the processor is thinking, what the risk that the processor is thinking. And what we do that's unique is that we work with lots of different processors that may be targeting a certain vertical or market that can get the merchant a better result. But in essence, what we're trying to do is reduce the risk for the merchant so they don't get chargebacks and run the risk of having a breach or somebody stealing data, and then obviously get them best prices and also the best solutions, for the business. Every business is different. They're processing cards in a different manner.
So speaking of businesses, and I know you work with virtually everybody, but give me an idea of some of the niches or the areas you're more tuned into.
Yeah, so obviously the hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, the areas that you might not think as much of as churches, school districts, municipalities, county governments, those type of businesses. But across the board, whether it's e-commerce businesses or brick and mortar, if they're taking a credit card, then we can help them.
So Square, all the new processing and everything.
Yeah, so great question. Square and Toast are proprietary offerings where you're utilizing their specific processor, and that's part of the education process that we would talk to about a business owner. If they utilize a platform like that their pricing may not be as competitive if they looked at a software that would allow them to plug in any one of a number of processors.
Right. Okay. So, what do merchants need to know? Because this is the thing that always impresses me. Every time I talk to somebody from our IBE group, and the experts, and we have a great all-star lineup of talent in the group, but I always, we get in the weeds. So, tell me what these merchants need to know. What are the risks? Because a lot of us just go blindly through life. We do what we do, and we don't really know the difference between having an independent, open architecture consultant like yourself versus just signing up for Tom's, Harry's business on the corner.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple things, Bruce, that they should know is obviously the jargon and what's negotiable and what's not negotiable. So, for instance, every card that you pay with has a different interchange rate. Those rates are published in the Wall Street Journal. They're accessible online through a Visa or MasterCard site. That's a commodity price. It's the same for every processor, whoever you work with.
So you're talking about like American Express, Diners, MasterCard,
Yep.
Visa, Discover.
Each one of those cards has a different rate, and how it's presented has a different rate. So I might be working with an HVAC company that is just writing down a credit card number on an invoice and not recognizing that if they swipe the card, that exact same card would go through at a better discount rate than if it was just keyed in through like what's called a virtual terminal where you enter the transaction on a computer.
Yeah, anytime you can decrease the potential for fraud, then you can decrease the fee.
That's exactly right. We're just trying to position that merchant in the strongest way that we can where they can process those cards. If the consumer is face to face, that's obviously the best scenario. If the consumer is swiping the card or going into an e-commerce site, entering their card through a checkout, that is preferable than somebody, the merchant, keying in or entering the information, or even worse yet, getting the information over the phone, so to speak.
I guess the best one is if they're actually using their own card, keeping it
Right.
in control all the time.
Yeah, in simplest terms, we call it, it breaks down to e-commerce. There's retail, which is card present. There's card not present. And mail order or telephone order, it'll be designated as a Moto account.
Right. Tim, there's been a lot of changes recently, or I'm assuming there are. I know that you're going to share these with us, where just going to the gas station now, it takes a lot longer process. It used to be put your chip card in and pull it out quick. What is the change that's happened there? Why has it changed? What's going on? So I know not all these vendors are actually up to speed with the new compliance out there.
Right, that's exactly right, Bruce. They have, so petroleum retail marketers are like your convenience stores, are most of the big branded stores like your ConocoPhillips have already made those adjustments. They've taken the capital and they're in a stronger position to make those changes. A lot of the smaller independent retailers, convenience stores, do not have the capital to make that change. This year in April, they shifted the liability to the merchants. If they don't accept EMV, then they're responsible for fraud or somebody putting a skimmer on their pump. And so we have come up with multiple solutions that are a significant discount than just going in and replacing the pump.
So it's shifted the liability to the merchant themselves. So do you think when the merchants all get up to speed and liability theoretically will go down, risk will go down, would that reduce some of the fees from American Express, MasterCard, and anybody else along the supply chain in this process?
Well, I think I don't know the answer to that. I would say that the way I would position it is executives from Visa have been very clear to the market that once the big branded, like in the state of Washington, for instance, they did a study where once the big branded stores went in and had EMV terminals, the fraud didn't really go away. It actually just went to the smaller unbranded stores. And I think what will happen is those unbranded stores will ultimately have to make that investment, whether it's replacing the pumps or a retrofit solution like we offer, will ultimately mitigate that concern for fraud and theft.
Tim, what is ACH opportunities?
Yeah, so we try to, it's part of our consulting or educating process. We want to make sure that if a client has recurring revenue, like for instance, public storage or HVAC company that has a service plan where you're paying that monthly fee, we try to talk to the merchant about shifting some of the credit card processing over to ACH. So it seems a little unusual for somebody that's in merchant services to talk themselves out of that, but we just feel it's a great play to advise those clients that they can. And it's not that they need, a lot of people will say, well, there's no way I'm going to move all my clients over to ACH.
Right.
And we're not suggesting that. What we're saying is even if you move the needle, in essence, you're going from a $100 transaction at 2% cost versus maybe 10 or 15 cents for that transaction. So it's cents per transaction, not a percentage of the transaction. So in that example, you're talking about 10 or 15 cents versus $2 on one transaction. So it certainly adds up.
So we touched on Square a little bit. Toast is something you don't hear a whole lot a term. What go ahead and explain that for folks?
Yeah, so Toast is a omni-channel solution, and what I mean by that is that you can do processing at a traditional setting in a restaurant. You can do carry out, curbside delivery. So omni-channel meaning that you're doing multiple payment solutions. Obviously, they're very competitive. They're out there. We have found that some merchants recognize, hey, I'm in a contract and I don't have the ability to pick the processor. As I mentioned earlier, if you control who the processor is, then you have the leverage or the ability to control your pricing. So it's a good fit. Obviously, they're making a splash in the marketplace, and certainly Square is the same thing. I find with Square, typically, if the merchant is processing more than $10,000 a month, then that's where we really can make a difference. And there's a lot involved to it. So how much that merchant processes every month, what their average transaction. So again, like if I used to real quick, if I may, an example with a coffee shop. A coffee shop has a low average ticket of about
$5 to
$5 to $10.
Yeah.
So low average ticket means that authorization fee up front, that 5 or 10 cent authorization fee, or 3 cents, whatever it may be, divided by that $5 transaction, that's a pretty good percentage versus somebody that might have a $500 average transaction, like a tire shop or something like that.
Right.
So that's where we really can make the difference. The other big advantage of having a merchant account, a true merchant account, where you go through underwriting and you have a merchant account, is that you can benefit from programs like cost plus programs. So as I mentioned, each card has a different rate. So if you take debit card transactions, for instance, that might have a true cost of 50 to 75 basis points, half to 3/4%, and a MasterCard or Visa might be 2.2%. So if you're under a Square program, all of your transactions are 10 cents plus 2.6%, and there's obviously some exceptions to that, but the majority of them are 10 cents plus 2.6%. You are surcharging that debit card that is normally at a half or 3/4%. So if you had a true merchant account and you were doing a cost plus program, that's where you can get what's called a net effective rate of significantly less than that. So for instance, optometrists that are card present, you might see a situation where the merchant might be having a net effective rate of like 1.32%. That's not uncommon for merchants that have a medium average size ticket of $100 to $300, and they're all card present type transactions.
And then back to the consumer side, that spread between what Visa or MasterCard gets and what the merchant pays, that's part of how they pay for the rewards programs and all these type things, or cash back in some credit card processes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the interesting things about that is when we've been in the business long enough, you see we work in some rural towns and you'll have an auto repair shop, and one of the guys will say, hey, there's no way I'm going to pay these credit card fees. And the other person embraces it and says, hey, I'm going to do it, and that's a cost of doing business, and I'm going to try to get the most competitive rate that I can. What we find is that business is going to quietly kind of move to the other way, either because they can't afford it or because they certainly can afford it and they understand the time value of money, and they want to get reward points and go out to dinner or travel. So I think it's important that you understand the business that you're in, and how that unintended consequence of whether you're accepting cards or not may impact your business.
Yeah, we skipped past something called Avamart. Is that something you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, so real quick, I just thought I'd bring that up. So the industry, if you look back 20, 25 years ago, it was really about pricing and service, and in essence, the business had kind of commoditized and compressed pricing quite a bit. So what happened is the industry said, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to come up with a solution for a particular vertical. So Avamart, for instance, works with a lot of veterinarians. They have a proprietary software, and in that software they built a solution where you could process credit cards. And we typically see fairly high fees for that, and it's a way to kind of supplement the cost of the software. It's a great business model. I'm certainly not saying that there's not some synergies there of having that sync, but what we have found in some cases that pricing on these proprietary software have gotten so great that a lot of merchants will have a standalone terminal and just process separately, and then one additional keystroke to say, hey, the bill's been paid.
Okay, that's interesting. Any other pricing protected items, the proprietary software you want to get into besides these ones? Anything left off, you think?
No, again, just probably the biggest thing is that you hear about Stripe and PayPal, and Shopify, where they're providing their own proprietary solution. And again, you want to at least make sure that you're aware of the fact that whether I can plug in my own processor. So some of these sites and solutions have allowed for people to plug in their own pricing, and then others haven't. And certainly the market will sort out what the best choice business model was.
What lasts, what won't last,
Right.
and narrow down to the
Yep.
best processes. So one thing that's unique about IBE, the Independent Business Edge, and all our members is that we do something of value add on the front side for prospective clients to give them a free, no obligation look. Can you kind of describe what that would be, and then would you kind of get into what, if somebody does engage your company, kind of what pricing it would look like on a regular basis, or maybe a cost plus, or how that would work?
Yep. So we're a little bit unique. As I mentioned, we work with lots of different processors, different verticals, high-risk processors. It typically starts out where we would review 2 or 3 merchant statements, analyze the pricing, understand how they're receiving cards, and then put together a proposal and send that back to them. And that's really the end of it. We are a little bit different in that manner, and where we want to provide the price discovery. We understand that a lot of times people will go back to their current vendor and say, hey, I need to lower my pricing, otherwise I'm going to move. But that model has allowed us to, our centers of influence, to not be burdened with a phone call like, hey, your salesman is beating up my client.
Right.
And so we kind of look at it as a more mature, or the adult table, if you will, where we're trying to provide that information, let them make that decision when they want. Of course, the flip side of that is young, good-looking kids running around door to door trying to close deals and pressure sales. And I've come to recognize that we're not all waiting for that salesperson to come in and talk about merchant services.
Yeah, good point, good point. From tiered pricing, you want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. So one of the things that the industry did over the last several years is they've gone to a tiered pricing. So for instance, I might come in to a business, and if I'm a salesperson out there in the industry and say, hey, we'll do all your cards, we'll do your processing at 1, because the merchant wants to know what's the rate.
Right.
We'll do it 1.89%. Well, they're not fully hearing the whole message. So what they're really saying is a card swiped or a qualified transaction is at 1.89%. If the card's not swiped, then it might default to a mid qualified rate, or if it's a called in over the phone or something, it'd be non-qualified, or if it's a rewards card or something like that. What they do is they take all of those different categories of interchange and they kind of break them up into 3 or 4 buckets. And if your transactions aren't into that particular area, then you're going to be paying more than 1.89%. And that kind of brings me to the next point. What we're focused on is what's that net effective rate. So if you process $10,000 and there's $500 deducted in fees, that's a 5% net effective rate. So we don't really care about what we're calling the nomenclature, jargon of whatever these different terms, PCI, compliance fees, all that kind of stuff. We're just really dumbing it down to, you process 10,000, 500 was deducted, that's the rate. And obviously our goal is to reduce that significantly.
Sounds good. Timmy, last thing you'd like to share, and then I'd like you to kind of just tell folks how they get a hold of you if they'd like to get more information about what they should understand when they go to picking out their merchant services or adding some services they may not be offering currently.
Yeah, probably the last thing I would like to share would be just simply that it is a good idea to review your statements periodically. I'll share with you a recent success story. WorldPay acquired Vantiv, and then shortly thereafter they called it a pricing action. And if you didn't read your statement, they were talking about a fee increase. So even though the merchant might have signed a contract and said, hey, this is what our fees are, they disclosed, hey, listen, we're going to do it. With Emerson and Company, we have buckets of merchant accounts at several different vendors, and we have great relationships with all those vendors. But if a vendor is not willing to opt out our portfolio, then when we call and say, hey, we want to opt out of that pricing action, it provides a little more leverage than maybe an optometrist calling a big 800-pound gorilla and saying, hey, First Data, we don't want to raise our rates, or whoever it may be. So again, just reach out to your CPA or to us, and we can review those 2 statements. Tell us how you process. So 2 complete consecutive statements with all the pages on it. We'll go through an analysis, provide you that price discovery, and maybe share with you a shift. Maybe some of it might be ACH or something like that. And the best way to do that is just to email it to us or give us a phone call.
Okay.
Yeah. One other closing thing I might just mention, and certainly we're all hearing about cryptocurrencies these days. There is a low adoption rate, and what I mean by that is if you surveyed 100 people, they probably don't have cryptocurrency on their phone and buying groceries and that type of thing. I do believe that it's coming, and in certain industries like cannabis or higher risk transactions, you're going to see that I think the direction of that, and I'm not advocating that cryptocurrency or any Bitcoin or anything is a great idea, but what I'm saying is the utility of blockchain is that when I move money to Bruce, that's a final transaction. Now, Bruce could always make good on it, like if the flowers that he delivered weren't great or something like that,
right.
He could always give you a refund, but it's really going to eliminate that fraud of saying, hey, I wasn't in your flower shop or I wasn't in your restaurant. So I think that that's coming. There's a lot of different solutions out there for that, and as the adoption rate begins to grow and more banks accept it, I think that you'll see that will definitely lower the cost for merchants. So instead of averaging 2% for cost of interchange, I think that you'll see transaction costs go under 1%.
Well, that'll be a big game changer in the bigger picture. Thanks for
Sure.
telling us bottom line profits. Well, Tim, I'm glad you joined us today.
Thank you.
And folks, check out our other IBE member videos we put out. They've got a lot of great content from a lot of our great members as well. So good way to enlighten yourself and how to be a little more effective with your business and personal life. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.